Introduction: The silent weight of more. There is a strange, quiet feeling that no one prepares you for. It doesn't arrive when you're struggling. It doesn't appear when you're dreaming of success. It shows up the moment things start getting better. You begin earning more. Opportunities open. Life becomes easier, more comfortable, more abundant. And then, unexpectedly, you feel it. A subtle discomfort, a hesitation, a quiet voice in your mind asking, "Is this okay? Do I really deserve this? Why do I feel wrong about having more?" This is not something people talk about openly, because on the surface, it doesn't make sense. After all, isn't more money supposed to bring freedom, security, happiness? So why does it sometimes bring guilt? Why do you feel uneasy charging more for your work? Why do you downplay your success around others? Why do you hesitate to fully enjoy what you've earned? And perhaps the most confusing question of all, why do you feel like you've done something wrong just by doing better? This audiobook exists to answer that question, because the truth is, this feeling is not random. It is not weakness, it is not lack of confidence, and it is definitely not a sign that you don't deserve success. It is something much deeper. Something shaped long before you ever earned your first paycheck. From childhood, you were absorbing messages about money, not through formal lessons, but through conversations, emotions, and experiences. You heard things like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," "Rich people are greedy," "We're not the kind of people who have that much," "Be grateful for what you have." Maybe your family struggled financially. Maybe they judged wealthy people. Maybe they valued humility so deeply that standing out, even financially, felt wrong. And without realizing it, you built an internal rule. There is a limit to how much I'm allowed to have. As you grow older, this rule doesn't disappear. It evolves. It hides itself in your decisions. You undercharge for your work. You hesitate to ask for a raise. You avoid opportunities that could significantly increase your income. You feel uncomfortable when others notice your success. And when you do earn more, you feel guilt. Not because of the money itself, but because you've unknowingly crossed an invisible line, a line drawn by your past. But there is something even deeper happening. This guilt is not just about money, it's about identity. Because when your income grows, your life changes. And when your life changes, you begin to feel different from the people around you, different from your family, different from the version of yourself you've always known. And that difference can feel dangerous, because humans are wired for belonging. At a subconscious level, your mind asks, if I become too different, will I still be accepted? So instead of fully stepping into abundance, you pull yourself back. You shrink. You stay within the boundaries that feel safe, even if those boundaries limit your potential. This audiobook is not about teaching you how to make more money. It's about something far more important, understanding why you feel conflicted when you do. Because once you understand the root of this guilt, it begins to lose its power. Over the next chapters, we will explore the hidden beliefs that shape your relationship with money, the psychological patterns that create guilt around success, the emotional conflicts between wealth and identity, the silent fear of outgrowing your past, and the internal limits that keep you from fully receiving what you earn. But more importantly, we will begin to rewrite those patterns, because here is the truth most people never realize. Feeling guilty about making more money is not a moral issue. It is a psychological pattern, and patterns can be changed. So as you listen to this audiobook, I want you to do one simple thing. Pay attention to your reactions. Notice when something resonates. Notice when something feels uncomfortable. Notice when a thought arises that says, "This sounds like me." Because those moments are where change begins. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand your guilt, you will see it clearly. And once you see it clearly, you will no longer be controlled by it. Because making more money was never the problem. The real question is, are you ready to feel comfortable having it? Chapter 1. The Beliefs You Never Chose. There is a powerful truth most people never question. Your relationship with money was formed before you were old enough to understand it. Think about that for a moment. Before you earned, before you saved, before you made a single financial decision, you already had beliefs about money. They came from your environment, from the way money was talked about in your home, from the emotions attached to it, from the stress or the silence surrounding it. Maybe money was always a source of tension, arguments, worry, scarcity, or maybe it was treated with caution, something to be respected, but never pursued too aggressively. Or perhaps wealth was viewed negatively, associated with greed, arrogance, or dishonesty. As a child, you didn't question these messages. You absorbed them, because at that stage of life, your mind is not analyzing, it is recording, and what it records becomes your internal truth. This is where your money identity begins, not based on logic, not based on reality, but based on repetition. If you heard, "Rich people are selfish," then part of you learned, "If I become rich, I might become a bad person." If you saw financial struggle, you may have learned having more money creates problems. If your family valued modesty and simplicity, you may have internalized wanting more is wrong. These beliefs don't disappear as you grow older. They go underground. They become subconscious. And that is exactly what makes them powerful. Because now they don't feel like beliefs. They feel like truth. So when you begin to earn more money, you are not just increasing your income, you are challenging everything your mind has been conditioned to believe, and that creates tension, internal conflict, a quiet resistance that you may not even understand. On one side, you have your desires to grow, to succeed, to create a better life. On the other side, you have your conditioning. Don't be greedy. Stay humble. Don't become one of those people. This is where guilt is born, not from the money itself, but from the conflict between who you are becoming and what you were taught to believe. And here is the most important part. You did not choose these beliefs, but you are living them. The question is, do you want to keep living them? Because once you begin to see these patterns clearly, you gain something incredibly powerful. Choice. You can start asking, is this belief actually true? Does it serve the life I want to build? Or is it simply something I inherited without question? Awareness is the first step, because you cannot change what you cannot see. And for many people, this is the first time they realize the guilt they feel about money isn't really about money at all. It's about the beliefs they never chose. Chapter 2. The Hidden Link Between Money and Morality. Let's explore something uncomfortable. Something most people feel, but rarely admit. At some level, many people believe making more money makes you a worse person. Not consciously, but subtly, quietly. It shows up in small thoughts. I don't want to be greedy. I don't want money to change me. I don't want to lose my values. On the surface, these seem like positive intentions, but underneath them, there is a deeper assumption that money and morality are somehow in conflict. Where did this idea come from? It often begins with the way wealth is portrayed, in stories, in media, in conversations. The wealthy are often shown as selfish, corrupt, power-driven, disconnected from others, while those with less are portrayed as honest, kind, humble, morally grounded. Over time, this creates a powerful association. Less money equals good person. More money equals questionable character. Even if you don't fully believe this, part of your mind has absorbed it. And this creates a dangerous internal conflict. Because now, money is not just about survival or comfort. It is tied to identity, to character, to who you believe you are as a person. But here is the truth most people never question. Money does not change who you are. It reveals who you are. If someone is generous, more money allows them to give more. If someone is kind, more money expands their ability to help others. If someone is insecure, more money may amplify that insecurity. Money is not the cause, it is the amplifier. So the real question is not, will money make me a bad person? The real question is, who am I when I have more? Because when you separate money from morality, something powerful happens. The guilt begins to fade. You no longer see earning more as something dangerous. You begin to see it as something neutral, a tool, a resource, an opportunity. And once that shift happens, you stop holding yourself back. Because deep down, what you've been protecting was never your morality. It was a belief. And beliefs can be rewritten. Chapter 3. The Fear of Outgrowing Your People. There is a fear that rarely gets spoken out loud. It doesn't sound like fear. It doesn't feel dramatic. But it quietly influences some of the biggest decisions of your life. The fear is this: what if I grow and leave people behind? At first, this may not seem connected to money, but look closer. When your income increases, your life changes, your environment shifts, your habits evolve, your opportunities expand, and slowly, almost invisibly, you begin to feel different. Different from the people you grew up with, different from your friends, sometimes even different from your own family. You may start noticing things you didn't notice before, conversations that no longer resonate, mindsets that feel limiting, comfort zones that you've outgrown. And with that awareness comes discomfort. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you feel the distance growing. This is where guilt quietly enters, because part of you starts thinking, why do I have more when they don't? Is it fair that my life is getting easier? Am I leaving them behind? And beneath all of these thoughts, there is a deeper emotional question. Will I still belong? Humans are wired for connection, for belonging, for being part of a group. And for most of your life, your identity has been tied to the people around you, their struggles, their realities, their way of living. So when you begin to rise beyond that, it doesn't just feel like growth, it feels like separation. And your mind interprets that separation as a threat. Because at a subconscious level, belonging equals safety, and losing that belonging feels dangerous. So what does your mind do? It tries to protect you, not by pushing you forward, but by holding you back. You might downplay your success so others don't feel uncomfortable, avoid talking about money altogether, stay smaller than you could be just to stay relatable. And sometimes, without even realizing it, you limit your growth. Because growing feels like leaving, and leaving feels like loss. But here's the truth you need to hear. Growth does not require you to abandon people. It simply requires you to evolve. Yes, some relationships may change. Some connections may feel different. Some conversations may no longer align. But that is not betrayal. That is transformation. And more importantly, your growth does not take anything away from others. This is one of the biggest misconceptions tied to money, that if you have more, someone else has less. But success is not a fixed resource. It is something you create. And when you fully understand this, the guilt begins to loosen its grip. Because you realize you are not leaving people behind. You are moving forward. And sometimes your growth becomes the very thing that inspires others to grow too. But that can only happen if you allow yourself to fully step into it. Not halfway, not with hesitation, not with guilt holding you back. Because the truth is, you are not responsible for staying the same just to make others comfortable. You are responsible for becoming who you are capable of being. And that version of you does not need to apologize for growing.
Chapter 4. The Invisible Ceiling You Live Under. There is a limit in your life that you cannot see, but you can feel it. It shows up in patterns, in repeated outcomes, in moments where things are going well, and then suddenly they stop. You get close to a breakthrough, and then something pulls you back. You earn more, then somehow you lose it. You get an opportunity, but hesitate just enough to miss it. This is not coincidence. This is what psychologists often call an upper limit. But you don't need the term to understand the experience. It is the invisible ceiling that defines how much success you feel comfortable having, and anything beyond that ceiling feels unsafe. Not logically, emotionally, because your mind is always trying to maintain balance. It wants your external reality to match your internal beliefs. So if deep down you believe, I shouldn't have too much, I don't deserve more than this is enough for someone like me, then the moment your life exceeds that level, your mind reacts. Not by celebrating, but by correcting. It creates doubt. It creates hesitation. It creates self-sabotage, not because you want to fail, but because success beyond your comfort zone feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. This is where guilt becomes a trigger, Because when you cross that invisible limit, you don't just feel discomfort, you feel like something is wrong. And that feeling pushes you to return to a level that feels normal, a level that feels acceptable. Think about this. Have you ever noticed how some people earn more but always end up back where they started, get close to success but never fully step into it, have the ability but somehow hold themselves back? This is not about capability, it is about comfort. And your comfort zone is not just about what you know, it is about what you believe you are allowed to have. That belief creates your ceiling, and until that belief changes, the ceiling remains. So what needs to shift? Not your effort, not your strategy, your identity. Because the moment you begin to see yourself as someone who can earn more, can hold more, can live differently, that ceiling starts to rise, and with it, your sense of normal expands. What once felt too much becomes natural. What once triggered guilt becomes expected. But this shift does not happen automatically. It requires awareness. Because as long as that ceiling remains invisible, you will continue to hit it, again and again, without understanding why. And the most important realization is this: your limits are not real, they are learned, and anything that is learned can be unlearned. So the next time you feel guilt when things start going well, don't ignore it, don't suppress it, pay attention to it. Because it might not be guilt at all. It might be the moment you've touched your ceiling. And the question is, are you going to step back or finally break through it?
Chapter 5. The Subtle Habit of Self-Sabotage. There's a moment that happens quietly, so quietly, in fact, that most people never notice it. Things start going well. You're earning more, you're making progress, you're stepping into a better version of your life. And then something shifts. You procrastinate, you delay an important decision, you avoid an opportunity you were excited about. You make a small mistake that costs you more than it should. On the surface, it looks random. Bad timing, lack of discipline, maybe even bad luck. But beneath the surface, there is a pattern driven by one powerful force: your discomfort with having more. This is self-sabotage, not dramatic, not obvious, but incredibly consistent. Because when you begin to exceed your internal comfort level, your mind doesn't always say, stop. Instead, it creates behavior that leads you back down. You don't consciously decide to lose money, you don't intentionally avoid success, but you act in ways that produce those outcomes. Why? Because success beyond a certain point starts to feel unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. So your mind does what it has always done. It protects you, even if that protection keeps you small. This is where guilt plays a critical role, because guilt creates emotional discomfort, and emotional discomfort demands resolution. So your mind looks for a way to relieve that feeling, and one of the easiest ways to remove guilt about having more is to no longer have more. So you spend more than necessary, you make poor financial decisions, you pull back from growth opportunities. Not because you're incapable, but because returning to your normal feels better than staying in discomfort. This is the cycle most people live in without realizing. They grow, they feel guilt or discomfort, they self-sabotage, they return to their comfort zone, and then they repeat it,
over and over again. The frustrating part, they often blame themselves. I need more discipline. I'm not consistent enough. I'm just not meant for this level. But discipline is not the real issue. The issue is internal conflict, because part of you wants to grow and another part of you feels unsafe doing so. And until that conflict is resolved, self-sabotage will continue. So what is the solution? Awareness. Because once you begin to recognize the pattern, it loses its invisibility. You start noticing when you're about to pull back, when you're avoiding something important, when you're making decisions that don't align with your goals. And in those moments, you gain a choice. Not a perfect choice, not an easy one, but a conscious one. You can pause and ask yourself, am I acting from growth or from fear? That single question can change everything, because self-sabotage only works when it goes unnoticed. Once you see it, you can interrupt it. And once you interrupt it consistently, you begin to build a new pattern. A pattern where success no longer triggers retreat. A pattern where growth feels safe. And when that happens, guilt begins to lose its control, because you are no longer trying to escape it. You are learning to move through it. And that is where real change begins.
Chapter 6. The conflict between desire and identity. There is a quiet contradiction inside you, one that shapes more of your life than you realize. On one side, you have desire. You want more income, more freedom, more comfort, more opportunity. You imagine a different life, a better life, a life where money is not a constant concern. But on the other side, you have identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are. And sometimes that story does not match your desires. You might desire wealth, but identify as someone who is simple. You might want financial success, but see yourself as someone who doesn't care about money. You might aim for growth, but carry an identity rooted in struggle. And when these two forces don't align, conflict begins, because your mind always prioritizes identity over desire. Why? Because identity feels stable, familiar, safe. Desire, on the other hand, requires change, and change feels uncertain. So even if you consciously want more, your subconscious may resist it. Not because your desire is weak, but because your identity is stronger. This is where guilt begins to take shape, because every time you move towards something that doesn't match your identity, it feels wrong. Not logically, emotionally. You might think, this isn't me. I'm not the kind of person who lives like this. This feels uncomfortable. And that discomfort gets labeled as guilt. But what you're actually experiencing is misalignment, a gap between who you are and who you are becoming. And your mind is trying to close that gap, usually by pulling you back, because staying the same is easier than redefining yourself. But here is the truth most people never fully accept.
If you want a different life, you must become a different version of yourself. Not completely different, not unrecognizable, but expanded. Because the identity that created your current reality cannot sustain a completely new one. So something has to shift. You have to update the story. From "I'm someone who struggles financially" to "I'm someone who can create and manage wealth." From "I don't care about money" to "I respect money and use it intentionally." From "I shouldn't have too much" to "I can have more and still be a good person." These are not just affirmations, they are identity upgrades. And until they happen, your growth will feel uncomfortable, because you are trying to live a life that your identity does not yet support. So the next time you feel guilt about making more money, pause and ask yourself, is this really guilt, or is this my identity being challenged? Because if it's your identity, then what you're feeling is not something to avoid, it's something to evolve. And once your identity aligns with your desire, something powerful happens. Growth no longer feels forced, it feels natural. Success no longer feels uncomfortable, it feels deserved. And money becomes something you can receive without resistance.
Chapter 7. The quiet pressure of other people's expectations. There is a version of you that exists in other people's minds. It's not who you truly are. It's who they believe you are. And without realizing it, you spend a large part of your life trying to stay consistent with that version. Think about it. Your family knows you a certain way. Your friends expect you to behave a certain way. Your social circle has a fixed image of who you are. Maybe you're the humble one, the simple one, the one who doesn't care about money, the one who stays grounded no matter what. These labels may seem harmless, even positive, but over time, they become expectations. And expectations create pressure, because the moment you begin to change, you risk breaking that image. When you start earning more money, living differently, thinking bigger, you are no longer fitting neatly into the version people are used to. And that creates tension, not always openly, not always directly, but subtly. You may notice small reactions, a shift in tone when money comes up, jokes that feel slightly uncomfortable, comments like, "You've changed," or even silence where there used to be support. And even if no one says anything at all, you still feel it, because part of you is constantly asking, what will they think of me now? This is where guilt begins to grow. Because now your success is not just about you. It feels like it's affecting how others see you. And for many people, that feels like a loss of relatability, a loss of connection, a loss of acceptance. So what do? You adjust. You hide parts of your success. You downplay your progress. You avoid sharing certain aspects of your life. Not because you're ashamed, but because you're trying to maintain harmony. You're trying to stay the person they recognize. But here is the truth. You cannot grow and remain exactly the same in other people's eyes. Change will always alter perception.
and that is something you cannot control. What you can control is whether you allow those perceptions to limit your growth. Because if you constantly adjust yourself to fit expectations, you will never fully step into your potential. You will stay within a version of yourself that was defined by others. And over time, that becomes exhausting because you are living two identities, who you are becoming and who you feel expected to remain. And the tension between those two identities is where guilt lives. But here is something you need to understand. Other people's expectations are not your responsibility. They are reflections of their comfort, not your potential. And sometimes the discomfort they feel is not about you changing. It's about them realizing they haven't. This is difficult to accept, but it is freeing. Because once you understand this, you stop trying to manage how others perceive your growth, and instead, you focus on living it fully, without apology, without explanation. Because the truth is, you were not here to remain who you were. You were here to become who you can be. And that version of you will not always fit into old expectations. But that doesn't make it wrong. It makes it growth. Chapter 8. The Comparison Trap and Hidden Resentment. There is a moment that creates more guilt than almost anything else. It doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, instantly, almost automatically. You look at someone else's life and compare it to yours. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, someone you grew up with, someone who once stood at the same starting point as you. And in a single moment, you notice the difference. Your life has improved. Your income has increased. Your opportunities have expanded. Your environment has changed. And theirs hasn't. That realization creates a pause, a subtle shift in emotion, and in that moment, a mix of feelings begins to surface. Gratitude, because you recognize how far you've come. Discomfort, because the difference feels visible. And something deeper, something harder to admit. Guilt, because part of you starts asking questions you never expected. Why do I have more? What did I do differently? Do I deserve this more than they do? And beneath those questions, there is something even more powerful, a silent judgment. Not just about yourself, but about life itself. Because comparison does not just measure success, it measures fairness. And when life feels uneven, your mind tries to make sense of it. It searches for logic, for reasons, for explanations. But often, there is no clear answer. And that uncertainty creates tension. Because deep down, you want to believe that effort leads to equal outcomes, that good people are rewarded equally, that life is balanced. But reality doesn't always reflect that. And when that belief is challenged, guilt fills the gap. You begin to minimize your success. It's not that big of a deal. I just got lucky. Anyone could have done it. Not because you fully believe it, but because it makes the difference feel smaller. safer, more acceptable. But there is another layer to this, a deeper one. Sometimes, comparison doesn't just create guilt, it creates distance. Because as your life evolves, your experiences begin to diverge from those around you. The things you think about change. The problems you face change. The conversations you relate to change. And slowly, connection begins to shift. You may feel less understood, less aligned, less able to express yourself freely. And that leads to something unexpected, isolation. Even when you are surrounded by people, because connection is not just about presence, it is about shared reality. And when that reality changes, so does the bond. In that space, guilt grows stronger, because now your success feels the reason for the distance. So what do most people do? They shrink. They downplay their growth. They avoid standing out. They stay within familiar emotional limits, because being equal feels safe. But here's the truth most people avoid. Life was never meant to be equal. Not because it is unfair, but because it is individual. Everyone is on a different path, different choices, different risks, different timing, different awareness, and most importantly, different internal beliefs. Your growth is not a reflection of someone else's failure. It is a reflection of your alignment. And when you begin to understand this, something shifts. Comparison loses its emotional weight, because you stop asking, "Why me?" and start understanding, "This is my path." You can still care. You can still support others. You can still give. But you no longer carry the burden of equal outcomes, because that burden was never yours. And when you release it, you stop shrinking. You stop apologizing. You stop hiding. And for the first time, you allow yourself to stand fully in your growth, without guilt, without comparison, without needing to explain your place in the world. Because the truth is simple. Your success does not take anything away from anyone else. And once you truly accept that, you are free. Free to grow, free to expand, free to experience what you've created completely.
Chapter 9. The Fear of Losing It All. There is a fear that hides quietly behind success. It doesn't show up at the beginning. It doesn't exist when you are chasing. It appears only after you arrive. When things start going well, when life begins to stabilize, when you finally feel progress, a quiet thought enters your mind. What if I lose this? At first, it's subtle, almost invisible. But over time, it grows. It begins to influence how you think, how you act, how you make decisions. You become more cautious, more careful, more protective, not just for your money, but for your identity. Because now, you are no longer the person trying to build something. You are the person trying to maintain it. And that shift changes everything. Because building is driven by possibility, but maintaining is often driven by fear. You start thinking, maybe this won't last. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose everything I've built? And beneath all of these thoughts, there is one core emotion: loss. But this fear is not really about money. It is about certainty. For a long time, you lived in a predictable reality. Even if it was limited, it was familiar. And familiarity feels safe. But now, you've entered something new, a higher level, a different environment, a reality you haven't fully adapted to. And your mind doesn't fully trust it yet. So instead of relaxing into your success, you start guarding it. And that guarding creates pressure. You hesitate. You avoid risk. You hold back. Not because you lack ambition, but because you fear losing what you've gained. This is where growth quietly slows down, because fear replaces expansion. And the more you try to control everything, the more exhausting it becomes. Because control is not stability. It is tension. This is where guilt can return in a new form. Not guilt for having more, but guilt for possibly losing it. Because if you lose it, you may feel like you failed your progress, failed your identity, failed the version of you that finally made it. But here is the truth that changes everything. Your security was never in what you have. It is in what you can do. Your ability to create, to adapt, to rebuild, to grow again. Because what you've built was not luck. It was capacity. And capacity does not disappear. So even if things change, you are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience. And once you trust that, something powerful happens. You stop clinging and start expanding again. Because you realize you are not lucky to be here. You are capable of being here. And anything built through capability can be built again. That realization removes fear. And when fear fades, guilt fades with it. Because you are no longer afraid of losing your place. You trust yourself to create another one. Chapter 10: Learning to Receive Without Guilt. There is a skill that almost no one talks about, but it changes everything. The ability to receive. Not earn, not chase, not struggle for. Receive. Because for many people, making more money is not the hardest part. The hardest part is allowing themselves to have it, fully, without resistance, without discomfort, without guilt. Think about this honestly. When something good happens financially, what is your first reaction? Do you feel calm, satisfied, at ease, or do you immediately downplay it, question it, prepare for something to go wrong? That reaction is not random. It is conditioned, built from years of beliefs, experiences, emotional patterns. Your mind has learned that having more is not completely safe. So even when you receive, you don't fully accept it. You create distance. You minimize it. You doubt it. You emotionally step away from it. And because of that, you never fully experience it. This is why some people earn more but never feel richer. Because wealth is not just external, it is internal. It is the ability to feel comfortable with what you have. So how do you change this? You don't force it. You allow it. The next time something positive happens, pause. Don't rush forward. Don't dismiss it. Don't distract yourself. Just stay with it. Feel it. Let yourself experience the moment fully. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. That's normal, because you are expanding something deeper than money. You are expanding your emotional capacity, your ability to hold more without resistance, and that takes time. The goal is not perfection. The goal is presence. Because the more you allow yourself to receive, the more natural it becomes. And gradually, something shifts. Money stops feeling heavy. It stops feeling like something you need to justify. It becomes neutral. And eventually, it becomes ease. You stop feeling guilty for having more and start feeling grounded in it. You stop questioning your worth and start accepting your reality. Because the truth is, receiving is not selfish. It is part of balance. You give effort. You create value. You receive reward. And when that cycle is complete, there is no guilt, only alignment. And in that alignment, you find something deeper than success. You find peace. And that is where true freedom begins. Final reflection. Becoming someone who can have more. At the beginning of this journey, you were introduced to a feeling, a quiet, confusing feeling, the guilt of making more money. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel logical, and yet it felt real. Now, after everything you've explored, that feeling should look different. Not because it has disappeared completely, but because you understand it, and understanding changes everything. You've seen how this guilt is not about money itself. It is about the beliefs you inherited, the identity you built, the fear of outgrowing your past, the pressure of expectations, the habit of self-sabotage, the discomfort of receiving, and the fear of losing what you gain. All of these layers, working together, creating a single emotional experience, guilt. But now you can see it clearly, and once you see something clearly, it loses its power to control you. Because you are no longer reacting blindly, you are responding consciously. And that shift is where transformation begins. You no longer have to ask, why do I feel guilty? Now you can ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? And when you ask that question, you move from confusion to awareness, from awareness to choice, and from choice to change. This is the real purpose of this audiobook. Not to remove every uncomfortable feeling, but to give you clarity, because clarity creates freedom. The freedom to grow without constantly pulling yourself back. The freedom to earn more without questioning your worth. The freedom to live differently without feeling like you've done something wrong. And most importantly, the freedom to become someone new. Because that is what this journey is really about. Not money, identity. The version of you that can exist without the limits you once believed in. A version of you that can have more without guilt, can grow without fear, can succeed without shrinking, can receive without resistance. That version of you already exists, not somewhere far away, not in the future, but within you, waiting for you to release the beliefs that have been holding you back, waiting for you to stop questioning your right to grow, waiting for you to finally accept that having more does not make you less of who you are. It allows you to become more capable, more impactful, more free. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: you are not taking anything from anyone by becoming more.
You are expanding what is possible for yourself and for others who are watching. Because whether you realize it or not, your growth sends a message that says, it's possible. And sometimes that message is more valuable than anything you could give. So, as you move forward from here, there is only one question left. Not, can I make more money? But, can I allow myself to have it? Because that is where the real work begins. Not in earning, but in accepting, in expanding, in becoming. And if you can do that, if you can truly allow yourself to step into more, without guilt, without hesitation, without shrinking back, then you will realize something powerful. You were never limited by money. You were limited by what you believed about it. And now, those limits are no longer invisible, which means they are no longer permanent. So, step forward, not carefully, not fearfully, but consciously, with awareness, with clarity, with intention. Because the life you are capable of living is waiting on the other side of one decision, to stop feeling guilty and start allowing.